Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing Nastia2001 in the 15-minute pool on ICC. And this is a rematch. I played this player, was it last video? Might have been last video. And this time, Nastia has white and opens with e4. Just thinking about what line I want to play. Let's play a Sicilian. Last time I played Nastia2001, they were actually rated exactly 2001. And I don't think I noticed that in the video. Someone pointed it out in the comments. So that's ironic. Knight f3, let's just play d6. I'm sort of feeling like a Scheveningen Sicilian, something to that effect. Let's take. And after knight takes, I'll play knight f6. Occasionally you see queen takes d4 here. But knight takes d4 is the overwhelming main line. So after knight c3, I can decide which way to take this. I could play a knight over with a6. I could play a classical with knight c6. I could play a dragon with g6. I'm thinking about playing a Scheveningen with e6, though, which is a flexible line. It can morph into Najdorf-like positions oftentimes. You don't see it too often, but it's a perfectly good variation for black. White is taking an unusually long time to make some normal moves. Okay, knight c3, let's play e6. Theory says that one of white's best replies to e6 is g4, because the bishop on c8 no longer observes the g4 square, so white can push this pawn 2 squares, trying to go g5 and disturb this knight on f6. Instead, white just plays bishop e3, so looking for an English attack-like setup. I could play a6, taking it into Najdorf territory. I could play just bishop e7. I think I like the idea of a6. I don't know if there's a way to keep it in independent Scheveningen territory, so a6 looks like the way to go. Yeah, let's prepare queenside counterplay ASAP. And before you put it in the comments, yes, I know I'm pronouncing Scheveningen the wrong way. This is just the easiest way for me to say the name of that Dutch town that this opening is named after. And if I were to actually try to pronounce it like a proper Dutch person, I think I would fail. So I'm going to say Scheveningen. Okay, f3, let's play b5. These lines get razor sharp. But part of the reason I'm okay with doing this is last time I played Nastia2001 in that Roy Lopez game, they seemed to not know a main line in the Roy Lopez, just a basic Roy Lopez move order. So that gives me some feeling that maybe they don't have the opening knowledge to scare me in some of these sharper lines, even though I don't play them regularly. So queen d2. I think I'll just play bishop b7. Could also play knight bd7. Is b4 played this earlier, or is it bishop b7 first? I can never remember. b4, knight a4. I think d5 would be premature then. There's also queen c7. So many move orders. Just spending a little time to make sure I get this semi-correct. I'm not expecting to remember much. It might be knight bd7 too. Bishop b7 looks logical, but I'm remembering a game I played, I think it was a standard game as well, where I played bishop b7, and later I found out it was a move order mistake. I don't know if it was this exact position, though. I mean, nothing out of the ordinary has happened yet. So if I play knight bd7 and white just castles, and then I play b4, what's going on there? You know, I think it might be knight bd7. Let's do that. Knight c6 is not a concern. We just play queen c7. The advantage of knight bd7 over bishop b7 is that I better control the e5 square. So let's say white were to castle now and I play b4. Then after, say, knight a4, I could play d5. And my knight would be helping to control that e5 square. So I think it is this move. And if you specialize in the Najdorf and are currently rolling your eyes at my only basic knowledge of theory and the English attack, then I apologize in advance. So white does castle, and I was thinking b4. Note that at b4, knight c6, I do have the in-between move b takes c3. So I think this move is okay to play. So if knight a4, will I continue with d5? I'm certainly leaning that way. And queen a5 is another line too. Knight a4, queen a5, attack the knight, and then after b3, knight c5. Is that right? Might be a little bit different. It's another variation. I think if knight a4, I probably will not play queen a5. I think I'd prefer d5, possibly queen c7. We'll see. Okay, knight a4. So is d5 premature? That's my only concern. I'm opening the center when white is already castled and has some presence down the d file, so that in itself could be a risky proposition. Maybe I should just play queen c7 and stay flexible. If queen c7, queen takes b4, d5, queen c3, queen takes c3, knight takes c3, white would be defending e4. I may have some comp there, some compensation, but is it enough? Could be. I take e4. If they take with their pawn, bishop b7. Might be all right. If d5 immediately, let's say e takes d5, knight takes d5, bishop c4, that's the type of line that would concern me. White developing rapidly. I have to be super cautious then. Maybe bishop b7 and look to castle as soon as possible. I feel like a well-timed knight f5 may hurt me, though, in that line. I'm leaning queen c7. And I can't forget about queen a5, but after queen a5, b3, I'm uncertain how to proceed, so hence I'm ignoring that line for now. So queen c7, queen takes b4, d5. Let's say queen c3, queen takes c3, knight takes c3, d takes e4. I feel like that e4 pawn will be weak, so that's what I would bank on for compensation. Let's do it. Queen c7 is a normal enough move. It's possible white could try to grab this pawn and then play that endgame. We'll see. g4, white attacks, okay? So looking to play g5, kicking this knight away. Common theme in these lines. So I could try to make room for this knight to move back, like let's say moving this knight and then allowing knight f to d7, but I think h6 is probably a better reaction. Stopping g5, or at least ensuring if g5 is played and I take, then they would have to take with a bishop and this knight could stay where it stands on f6. Yeah, let's do that. They can play h4, but note that if they play h4, g5 followed by pawn takes g5 is not yet a threat because of the pin on the h file. So maybe I get a chance to play this desired d5 move. Yeah, like now would be the time to play d5 if it's going to work for me. Let's do it. You have to time your counterplay so well in these sharp lines. And I wouldn't be walking into a line like this in a tournament game, especially against someone even close to my own strength, because it's just a minefield if you don't know the theory. I'm doing it on video because I like mixing up my openings, and I want to play openings that pertain to all my viewers. And the Najdorf, which we reached via transposition in this game, is one of the most popular and interesting openings in chess. It's just not a part of my repertoire, but I still appreciate how rich and complex it is. So it's fun to play. Bishop h3, okay. This somehow seems like it's still theory. Like white prepares g5, and they're letting me take on e4. I do wonder if I take on e4, they get g5 in, if I'm just going to get hammered with a sacrifice on this square. Is that something I have to be concerned about? So let's calculate a moment. So if d takes e4, g5, knight d5 would be natural. Do I get hurt if there's a sacrifice here? Bishop takes or knight takes. Also, are there any alternatives to d takes e4? Or am I just obligated to go for that line and hope for the best? D takes e4, g5. Let's say I don't take that pawn on g5. Let's just say knight d5 right away. Knight takes e6, f takes e6, bishop takes e6. Knight takes e3, queen takes e3. That looks survivable to me. My king is exposed in the center. There's lots of exchanges that are taking place, but that looks like I can survive. I don't know, though. I'd have to tread carefully. And there's also the possibility of d takes e4, g5, knight d5, bishop takes e6. That's probably the plan. And then after fe, then knight takes e6, and white is on my queen, and they're also on d5. So that's a concern. So d takes e4, g5, knight d5, bishop takes e6. I do have knight takes e3 in between move. They could take d7 with check. I take with the bishop, let's say. They play queen takes e3. Then I can't win their knight on a4 because they have queen takes e4 check, forking my king and my rook. One of the problems here, though, is if I don't take on e4, white's getting g5 in next move. And how in the world do I react to that? g5, if my knight has to move, they can play g6 next and just totally destroy my pawn structure. It's almost like I'm forced to go down this road with d takes e4. Knight c5, knight takes c5, bishop takes c5. Just don't see that ending well after g5. g5 is so natural. Tough spot right here. Pawn g5 could be played myself. It's a sacrifice. It's probably not a very good one. H takes G, bishop takes, take e4, maybe. Looks awfully risky. Take on f6, knight takes, g5 even then. At least that position's a little more stable, though. Let me look at d takes e4 one more time. So d takes e4, g5, knight d5, bishop takes e6. I mean, fe knight takes just looks terrible. I think that's just losing. So after bishop takes e6, I could take e3. They take with a queen. I just don't like the fact that they're on e4 so soon after that. Or I think actually after knight takes e3, take d7. It's even better. You know, I might go for this g5 move. Really not happy about potentially having to play it, but I just don't see a lot of good alternatives. You see me getting killed in multiple lines, but what about knight e5? Thought about knight e5 briefly, just trying to get a knight c4. Knight e5, bishop f4 looks unpleasant, though. Yeah, I don't trust that line. Okay, I'm going to go for g5. I cringe to think what the computer will say of this move. But I've probably played worse moves in my chess career. So I'm trying to halt the g5 idea from white and also blocking this bishop on h3. That's the sole plan with this. So after bishop takes g5, d takes e4, let's continue the forcing play. Bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, pawn g5. Was thinking about e3 there to try to slow white down. Maybe bail towards some sort of endgame. Queen takes e3, knight d5, maybe queen f4 coming. Best case scenario, I think I'm down a pawn there and get the queens off the board. I mean, here, do I have much alternative to just taking on e4? Maybe bishop d6. Is that so bad? Bishop d6, they might retreat this bishop. That could be okay. I'm under 5 minutes now, so let's think about this fast. D takes e4, bishop takes f6. Can't sneak in bishop h6 yet, so I'd have to take with the knight. Then they go g5. e3, queen takes, knight d5. Yeah, I don't know. Don't know about that line. I think I'm going to try bishop d6. It's a little more complicated. Maybe I can confuse white. If they move this bishop back, perhaps like bishop g2, maybe rook g8, looking to threaten rook takes g5. In a perfect world, I would have time to play bishop b7 and then castle queenside. Clearly, my king is not going to find refuge on the king side, so maybe castling on that wing would help. White might want to play a move like king b1, just to safeguard the king against any future bishop f4 ideas. But even bishop takes f6 right now could be considered. Bishop takes f6, bishop f4, it would win the queen, but after bishop takes h8, if I take d2, then white has won 2 minor pieces and a rook for the queen. So it's possible on bishop takes f6, I might just want to recapture instead of going bishop f4 right away. Part of the motivation for bishop d6 was just to play a move that forces my opponent to think. Taking on e4 was probably what they expected, so at least this way I give them a chance to mess up and they have more options to consider. Maybe I can even up this time. Well, even though I'm not happy about the way this game has proceeded, I think it's still interesting for you guys. It's instructive to see how a decent player might try to scramble out of a bad position and mount a defense. Because defending in chess is no less important than attacking well. I mean, you figure a decent portion of the time in a chess game, you will be on the defensive. So you have to have the skill set to withstand the barrage of attacks sometimes. Okay, so he takes. I'm probably just going to take back. I know they might have a move like knight f5 here. I was thinking bishop e5 could be okay against that. Knight f5 would attempt to get me to take so they could take on d5, which would fork my rook and also that pawn on f5. Yep, they play it. I was thinking about just playing bishop e5. Bishop f4 might also be okay, but bishop e5 could be even better. Bishop e5. Yeah, let's do that. If I can play bishop b7 next, then at least I could threaten e takes f5. The position is sharp right now. I don't see a hammer blow for white, though. Bishop e5 also covers g7, so I don't have to worry about knight g7 check for now. On f4, I could just play bishop takes f4. Bishop takes f4, queen takes f4. Queen takes, knight takes. I believe that's okay for me. Should be. This knight is offsides. It's not in the game yet. So I can take some solace in the fact that that knight is sitting over there on a4, useless for the moment. Saving bad positions is definitely a skill in chess. I had a game in the US Chess League that I played just last week against international master Andrei Gorovets, where at one point I had, about a 4 or 5 point advantage according to the engine. And I knew it was a winning position for me, and so did he. He was well aware of that fact. But from that point on, he started playing really well, and my opponent made a number of defensive decisions that complicated the game enough that at almost every turn, I had something to think about. He didn't just roll over and die and agree to like trade down pieces and simplify the position. He kept coming up with good defensive resources that sometimes even the computer didn't think is best, but from a human perspective, gave me the most chances to screw up my winning game. And eventually it worked. He saved a draw. My advantage gradually faded away, and a couple well-timed defensive ideas turned the position around for him. So it's definitely a skill. Knight e3, okay. So I could take it, but I could also just play bishop b7, which I'm kind of leaning towards. Maybe knight f4 is better. Knight f4 creates more tension. Knight f4 hits the bishop too. I kind of like that move more. d7 is well protected, right? I don't need my knight on d7. Better defended than it already is. Now let's try it. I think taking is a little cooperative, so again, I'm trying to make the move that gives him more to think about. I know he's not thrilled about having to play bishop takes f4, if that's the move that they decide on. And by the way, I'm saying he, I know Nastia could be a girl's name. I say it out of regularity. I'm just so used to calling my opponents him or they. Don't read into that, please. But it very well could be a she. Okay, so bishop g2, rook takes h1. I think keeping the tension would be better. Let's go rook g8 and attack that bishop. This is a buried bishop anyways on g2. So I'm threatening to take. Note how this bishop controls h8. So that's nice. I don't have to worry about a infiltration on that square. Taking on g2. They could take with a knight. I don't think that does much. I think just bishop b7 is fine here. Ratchet up the pressure. Bishop b7 is their knight c4 then. It'd be unusual, but possibly playable. For that reason, maybe I should take. Take on g2. It's a weird bishop to grab, but maybe it's best. Yeah, let's do that. I got to do something fast too. Coming up on the 2-minute warning. Yep, they take with the knight. So, all right, let's do this. Attacking f3. Now this rook is helping to control d8, so if this knight ever had to move, something like queen d8 isn't going to win for them. I'm hoping they start playing some defensive moves now and give me time to organize. Ooh, also bishop c6 could be a plan. Bishop c6 hitting this knight. b4 is currently undefended. I got to bear that in mind too. But maybe I can get them to play something like queen d3 or queen e2 and then hit them with bishop c6. I don't know if I'm all that torn up about allowing queen takes b4 either. And if white grabs that pawn, that opens lines against their own king. So maybe that's not a terrible turn of events for me. Okay, so I'm thinking bishop c6. Yeah, let's do that. Attack that knight. Now queen takes b4, there's something like rook b8. They might be able to play queen c4 then. Queen b7. I've got pressure. Oh no, queen c4 I could actually just take on a4. So if queen takes b4, rook b8, queen c4, I can just take on a4 because my queen is defended by that bishop, this multi-purpose bishop. Well, I could try f4 here. But f4, I might have some good counter arguments, like f4, rook takes g4. Or just f4, bishop h8, drop that back. They're going to allow me to open up their king if I want with takes. Okay, yeah, let's do it. Now knight b6 or knight c5. Kind of leaning towards knight b6. Knight b6, queen takes b4. Rook c8 probably. Yeah, ooh, gotta hurry. 136. I'll keep the c file clear for rook c8. I've got enough defenders on the d8 square for now, as I was saying. So one threat now is knight c4, queen moves, and then bishop b2 check. If I can try to force that king onto b1, that's favorable. Wow, they take it. Okay, I was thinking rook c8 against that. e7 is guarded. I'm threatening mate on c2. Let's see how they choose to guard this. If knight e3, I was thinking bishop f4. They move the queen back. Okay. Let's do this now. So bishop b2 check ideas. Also rook b8 is an idea. So bishop b2 check, king b1, rook b8. White would be hard-pressed to get out of that. They might have to bail out with queen takes b8 followed by rook d8. Something along those lines. I think I've got some serious counterplay going. If c3, probably rook b8 still is strong. Yeah, definitely. This is amazingly similar to another standard game I recall in the same line against a lower rated player. I lost a pawn or two early on, but then my counterplay eventually materialized. This is following a very similar storyline. They could try to move this rook up the board like rook d3 to give the king some running room to d1, but that seems suspicious as well. Actually, rook d3, rook b8 just traps the queen, doesn't it? Yeah, I don't know that white has a good solution right now. Every possibility I'm looking at for them fails. And they're running out of time. They have less time than I do. Maybe a4. Okay, they're just going to attack my bishop. So I was thinking check followed by rook b8 in that case. Don't see a reason to deviate from that.
Check.
Yeah, so this now. And because the queen's under attack and moving it should just run into tons of discovered attacks with my bishop, or just knight a3 check. I think they're probably looking at having to play, yeah, like rook d8 or something like what they just did. All right, so if I take with the queen, bishop takes, knight d2 check. See an interesting line there. I could also just do queen takes d8, or rook takes d8, I mean. So queen takes d8, bishop takes, knight d2 check. Oh no, never mind. I think I see a good line here. Yeah, let's take. And then I'm going to take here. And then I get knight d2 check in and win the rook, is my point.
Check.
And he's got a bishop hanging and also g4 hanging. So let's do this. Let's take that. Okay, so white's got a bunch of pawns on the queen side, but I have some pawns in the center that are ready to rumble too. Knight c5, it's a good move. Okay, let's go here. I've got to get these pawns running. Threatening knight c4. King there, good response. Let's give it a check. Repeat once. I really don't want to draw. I'm going to take a risk.
Check.
I'm not sure what that check was all about. I don't think that was a good idea for them. They're just going to give the bishop right away. Wow. Also don't think that was a good idea. So now I'm getting this check in.
Time war check.
Let's go and win that a pawn.
Check.
Ooh, and they drop this too. All right. So I think we should be able to win this.
check,
Yeah. They can just move their king. Let's go get a queen. Make sure we don't stalemate them.
checkmate,
And mate. Okay, so that was obviously decided in the last minute or so, but I feel like that should have been a win after I got in the bishop b2 check, rook b8 idea. Not sure my decision here to play queen takes d8 was the best. It was still slightly unclear. Like, I actually wondered after knight takes f1 if white could have played bishop g5. Bishop g5 was probably a better attempt, stopping rook takes g4. Maybe after bishop g5 I could play f6, bishop takes f6, rook takes g4. Let's go back and have a look at this one. So I played the Scheveningen e6, and in doing so, you create this small Sicilian pawn center, pawns on e6, d6. They do control a lot of territory. Seems like Sicilian players kind of fall into two categories, those that prefer the small center and those who like the center with e5. e5 isn't played immediately because of bishop b5 check, by the way. And after bishop d7, I believe the line take, queen takes, knight f5 is considered good for white, who has some control over d5. And that's the strategic implication of playing e5, the main strategic implication. If you put your pawn there, you have to watch d5 more because that square is weaker. Whereas e6, you're not grabbing as much space, but you are covering that traditionally weak d5 square. So bishop e3 was played, and I just transposed into a Najdorf, an English attack. There might be other moves than a6, like maybe I could play bishop e7, bishop e7, or knight c6, just developing, going into a classical, but a6 is one of the most popular ways of playing. So f3, I played b5, getting queenside counterplay going. Yeah, and here I spent a little time trying to refresh my memory, or lack thereof, of the move orders, because I'm pretty sure I played bishop b7 here in a prior standard game, but I also remember thinking afterwards that was a mistake, and I think some people even commented as such. It's just so hard to know. I mean, you can try to feel your way through these positions, but as I said in the video, this is not a line I would just play over the board without knowing the exact theory. It's just a minefield. You saw how sharp the game gets, and that's like par for the course in this line. So let me just turn on the engine. It'd be better to consult the opening book, but since we only have the engine available, let's just do that. So knight bd7. I thought about the immediate b4 as well, in addition to knight bd7. Couldn't remember after knight a4 what really happens here. Maybe d5, guarding the pawn. But that allows e5. So, I mean, one of the points of knight bd7, the main point, in my mind, at least the way I played it, is that you're better controlling e5. So you can get b4 followed by d5 in without worrying about the pawn push to e5. So white castled. I played bishop b7. Yeah, I would assume this is now an alternative. Sometimes you'll see stuff like bishop b7 and then g4 looking to play g5, and then either h6 as I played or knight b6 making way for the knight to retreat here. So these knights fit together nicely, and in avoiding playing h6, white may have a harder time getting through on the king side and executing a pawn break. So I played b4. Knight ce2 could also be considered here for white, but they chose knight a4. Queen a5 is the move that sticks out in my memory, but I just didn't remember how it goes after this. I'm pretty sure there's a variation that goes like this. a3, and white tries to exploit the pin here. It's really hazy beyond this, though. I couldn't tell you definitively how this should proceed. Never played this position for either color. So queen c7. Yeah, and white could grab the pawn on b4. I was thinking d5, queen c3, because white has to retreat their attacked queen. So queen c3, queen takes, knight takes, and then I was thinking take here. There's also e5. That's a good point that the engine is making. e5, getting this knight to move so we can continue with d4. Interestingly, the engine thinks that's actually okay for white if this happens. They get 3 pawns for the piece. That could be interesting. I wonder if this has been seen before. Very possible. In the Najdorf, it's kind of hard to go your own way early on. This is one of the most popular openings in chess, and hence there's a lot of games that you can find and have been played before in even some of these very sharp lines. So I thought white might grab the pawn on b4, but Nastia2001 just stuck to the plan of trying to push the pawn to g5. So I played h6. So contrary to earlier where I was talking about how you might want to move this knight so as to prepare knight fd7 in response to g5, I think I'm less likely to do that here, mainly because knight b6 is just going to run into stuff like this. Discovery on the queen here. So luring that knight to a4, even though it's kind of out of play, like it does influence some squares like b6. I briefly thought about knight c5, looking to get this back here, but it seemed artificial. I couldn't recall too many examples where black puts the knight on c5 in the English attack. Yeah, the engine also doesn't seem to like it. So h6 it was. White plays h4, and I break in the center d5. I mean, this move seems risky, but you have to bear in mind that white is coming at you, and unless you as black here organize some sort of counterplay, you're just going to let white have their way with you on the king side. White will get in g5 whether you like it or not. I tried to prevent that with g5 myself, but that was me just pulling the emergency brake, really. It wasn't a plan that I would have banked on from the start. Maybe there's other moves. I don't know. e5 the engine likes. That seems counterintuitive to me, allowing knight f5 with the attack on d6. d5 now, if take, bishop b7. So trying to sack a pawn for activity. Maybe there's chances black can win this back. I don't know. d5 seemed consistent, at least. But I was a little concerned when Nastia just started hammering out these moves like bishop h3, unconcerned if I take. So let's investigate d takes e4, because this is the move that looks consistent, but I was really scared after g5. Forcing this knight to move. And I could take, but I think more natural would be knight d5, because I don't want to open more lines than I have to. So after this, I was just thinking bishop takes e6 was going to hurt me real bad, and that seems to be the case. +2. With the main tactical point being that if f takes e6, knight takes e6, white is attacking my queen, and they're also on d5. So I lose material. What was another line I saw here? Bishop takes e6, knight takes e3. And I think check. Bishop takes d7, check, bishop takes d7, queen takes e3. I also assumed this was bad, mainly because bishop takes a4 runs into check. This with the fork on the king and the rook. This just wins for white. I do see the engine thinks that castles is acceptable for black. Not a move I would consider too closely from a few moves out, but it makes sense. I mean, black is otherwise getting killed down the e-file with that open king, so castling and it's even material. I'm still on a4. Somehow black holds on. Queen takes here, and I don't think I want to take because of check. Queen b8, take check. Here, and at the very least white will win the bishop. But instead, instead black can play queen b7 in response to queen takes e4, and check. This endgame might be acceptable for black, despite being down a pawn. I do have the two bishops, and I am attacking a4. But there might be an even bigger problem in that line. After knight takes e3, the engine says white can play queen takes e3 instead, and just leave the bishop as is. They don't have to take on d7 at their earliest convenience. So if I take again, I assume, yeah, queen takes e4. They're on the rook. They're on e6. I have no semblance of coordination. This is really bad. Something like bishop b7. Yeah, queen g6 check looks pretty crushing. If my king goes to d8, knight takes e6 is a killer fork. King here, rook he1. Just invite everyone to the party. Yeah, and one glance at the position is all you need here. Black's just getting destroyed. +16 for white. So at least I had the wherewithal to avoid taking on e4, even though that was the original line I calculated. It looks consistent. It gives white or it gives black the use of the d5 square, but it loses, it looks like, after g5, knight d5, bishop takes e6. If I could survive here, I think it would be a miracle. So what other moves could I consider other than g5? There we go. The engine thinks it's best. It was saying knight e5 for a second. Don't know if I think I did think about that. I mentioned that bishop f4 I thought was unpleasant. Maybe that's wrong. Bishop d6. I guess I might be threatening knight d3 check followed by taking the bishop on f4 in some circumstances. Maybe knight e5 is worth considering. g5 is still possible. What if knight c4 here? That's a move I was thinking about. Queen f2, take e3. White takes back. Still a big advantage for white. I have the bishop pair, but I had to make multiple moves to secure that bishop pair. And I'm still facing an onslaught of the g-pawn plus this bishop on e6 and the white pawn on d5. All these attacking devices from white. Yeah, that doesn't look good either. Well, I think this position is just flat out dangerous for black. It's possible there's games in this line. I wouldn't doubt it at all. But I'm guessing that my move order just has to be better. Like probably queen a5 back here. I mean, queen c7, just kind of playing on general principles isn't enough in these positions. I'll reiterate that. You have to know exactly what you're doing. The sharper the position, the more exact your knowledge has to be. This isn't like a queen d8 Scandinavian where mostly just knowing the setups is good enough. No, if you play a line like this, you gotta know your theory. And that's why I don't really recommend super sharp lines to most casual chess players. It's fun to play, and you see GMs playing these lines all the time, but bear in mind, like these guys have spent dozens of hours poring over sharp positions that arise, into the 10s and 20s of moves. So if you see a cool game online between two top GMs and it looks so nice and tactical and fun to play, just bear in mind, if you play it yourself, you're assuming the risk. For most people, it's more practical to play quieter openings, I think. Openings where you can get by with less exact knowledge and still come out unscathed into the middle game. I think that gives you more of a chance for a real chess result as opposed to just walking into your opponent's preparation. All this is probably more true at, I would say, like 15 to 2200 level. Because if you're super low rated or you're just starting out in chess, like nobody you're really playing is going to be that booked up, even in some of these more popular variations. So I played g5, hoping to forestall white's g5 push. They just grabbed the pawn. Seems fine. Now I played bishop d6. Computer doesn't like that move. It says take on e4. But I thought if take on e4, that would be easy for white. Take here, knight takes, and then g5. Continuing their attacking ways. Ah, okay. Well, that's something I didn't see. After g5, white is not actually threatening to take my knight, because I would have bishop h6 in reply. So the engine says, go ahead and just grab on f3. Yeah, because if they take here, bishop h6, hello skewer. That's a nice point. I just assumed that after g5 I would have to move this knight, but that is not the case. So that's another potential improvement, taking on e4. If I had known that or seen that, then yeah, that might have swayed my decision to take this pawn versus playing bishop d6. It does still look good for white, though. Bishop f4 is the recommended move, attacking the queen. If e5, now play g5. White's got a bishop hanging, but they're also threatening bishop takes d7 check with the discovery on my rook. Sharp stuff, and the margin of danger is pretty small for black. I mean, one misstep and I can just resign. So I tried to get some pieces out, bishop d6. They took on d5. I took with the knight. Now knight f5. This move looks cool, but I'm not sure it's best. They're hoping for e takes f5, queen takes d5, which is a disaster for black. They're on my rook, and the e file's open, leading towards my king. But if I can just calmly move my bishop against knight f5, maybe this is fine. Bishop g2 is recommended instead, attacking my rook. Yeah, now my bishop is not defending my rook either. I probably would play rook g8, and now knight f5. That kind of transposes to the game, potentially, after bishop e5. Maybe knight f5 is okay. So here, the engine wants me to play bishop f4 and go for the queen swap. So take, queen takes, trade here. I at least will not get checkmated this way, but I am still down a pawn. It's hard to see what compensation I have. Bishop g2, I don't have time to take this once again because of the attack here. What if I just played rook g8? Knight d6, king e7, rook h7, white can go on the attack. Yeah, and if I grab this bishop, probably this will happen. Knight takes c8, now both rooks join to attack d7. So even after the queens come off the board, there's some lines that black has to be concerned about. I played bishop e5 just looking to keep more tension in the position. I really wanted to try to force white to make some tough decisions. I know I'm also potentially making it harder on myself, but I'm trusting in the fact that I'm the better player, and I've known from past games, lots of past games against lower-rated players, that when you give them chances to go wrong, they're going to make a mistake more often than you will. Whereas if you just play forcing lines against lower-rated players, you don't give them as much of a chance to go wrong as if compared to if they have more choices. So it sounds really basic, and if you watch my videos, I've given that advice before, but it's something valid to think about. So knight e3 was played. Again, bishop g2 is the recommendation. And here I played knight f4. Bishop b7 is better, according to the engine. Yeah, again, knight f4 was motivated by the desire to keep the position sharper. I didn't want to just give white an easy decision to take my knight, as would be the case after this. But then again, if this is good for black, it's just good. Or at least acceptable. So knight f4, and they played the bishop back to g2. The engine says boldly take the pawn, just leave this bishop hanging. Oh, because they're threatening mate. Queen e7 mate. That didn't cross my mind. Yikes. And then I might be forced to play a retreating move, knight g6, because this knight doesn't have a lot of good squares to go to. Yeah, if this knight moves like knight f8, then rook d8 is killer. Ooh, I could have been in some serious danger had queen takes b4 been played. Yeah. I didn't appreciate that, nor did my opponent, I think, at the time. The fact that once this knight moves from d5, this is undefended, and queen e7 could be coming. Also knight b6, wow. That's a crazy-looking move. So I can't take it with the knight. I'm going to get mated at a couple moves like this.
Checkmate.
That's like Morphy versus the Duke, that famous game. And what if queen takes? If queen takes, knight c4 is very good for white. Forking the queen and the bishop. Oh, I think I see why. If I just make a move like this, then knight takes e5. And if queen takes, then I lose this. And white is killing me on the dark squares. So knight f4 was riskier than I thought. Yeah, queen takes b4, even that nice shot knight b6 could be punishing black. So instead, bishop g2 was played. I wanted to avoid the trade of rooks and also attack this dark square bishop. I'd really like to win that dark square bishop. I think that would be nice. Because if something like this happens, then always white's going to be pinned up here, and it's going to take them a couple moves to get out of that. And maybe I can use that time to organize my position. So I knew white was going to be hesitant to play bishop takes f4. So they played bishop h4 instead. Again, this move knight b6 is possible. That's a nice one. Yeah, and same idea. If take, knight c4, win a tempo on the queen, eliminate the bishop, go take f4. So here, and now I took g2. Seems weird to give up a good knight for that bishop, but on this, I think I didn't like this again. But maybe that was... Wait, was that the case? Bishop b7, what didn't I like here? I thought it might have been knight c4, but I see even this is still strong. There's something about bishop b7 I didn't like. Yeah, I think in the limited time I had to analyze this move scared me because of this.
Check.
But apparently after knight takes g2, black has nothing to be concerned about and is actually close to winning. Knight takes here. We just take with the knight. Now the rook is joining in, so there's no mate on d8. Yeah, and if take here, I assume bishop takes f3, attacking all of these. Sharp position. Very sharp. So I took g2. White eliminated the knight. Yeah, I was trying to deflect that knight away from the c4 square. And note that if queen takes g2, I think, again, this bishop f4 move could be strong, pinning white. Or bishop b7, just developing. So they took with the knight. That made me feel a little bit better. The knight is directed away from the center. I played this. rook f1. Okay, so again, queen takes b4. So this move was kind of the move of the game, at least as far as white's attack's concerned. Because at multiple points that would have threatened this, and white can even ignore attacks elsewhere because of the imminence of that mate threat. Yeah, we just both consistently overlook that. So rook f1, and now I get time to do this move. a5 is also possible, just guarding b4. Okay. Seems like I'm out of the woods at this point. It's not so bad for black anymore. I've reduced the material, and I've held on, only losing one pawn over the last, like 10 moves or so. And here, again, white should take on b4. I thought that would give me a lot of play after rook b8. Oh, no. Queen e7 mate again. Yeah, I just completely overlooked this move multiple times. This is like a blind spot. Weird. I don't know if my opponent overlooked the same thing. It kind of seemed like it, because they never played that until later. So after queen takes b4, I would have to avoid blundering into mate. I'm not sure I would have. I might have just played rook b8 and just got mated on e7, and you guys would all be laughing in the comments at me right now. f6. Black is still hanging on. I mean, block this bishop out. I'm still threatening rook b8. So they played b3, which looks like a definite mistake. Now I get to take a4, and their king is open to the elements. This is where I felt the game was finally turning around for me, because I distracted them from attacking me in the center, and now I get in some play. Both had very little time left at this point. So moves I was debating between here were knight b6, knight c5, and rook c8. Engine likes knight b6. Okay. So now they take here. And I played rook c8, setting up an immediate mate threat. Note that e7 is now defended, finally. So there's no mate. I think I even remarked about that during the game. So here, rook b8 is also strong, just lining up against the queen, getting ready to do discoveries with this knight, like knight c4. Yeah, I think white's hard-pressed to defend now. I mean, taking b4 doesn't seem to help their case, but black suddenly has a ton of play. I'm just trying to go here, or knight c4 and bishop b2 check. White's king is far from safe now. So take, I played rook c8. I thought maybe rook f2 might be the best defensive try, but I was having a hard time finding something valid for white. They played queen b3, knight c4, f4.
Check.
Now I give a check. Pretty sure I had a better way to win this. I played rook b8. That seemed consistent. The engine says I can even take a pit stop to grab this pawn over here. I guess that makes sense. It seems way more natural to play a move towards white's king like rook b8, but yeah. I can keep that threat in reserve and threaten the knight, which is in turn defending the bishop, so if it moves I can just take h4. So here,
check.
And now rook d8. Okay, so what would have been the easier way to win this? I played queen takes d8, so rook takes d8 would have been better. And then bishop takes and just king takes. Okay, so just keep the extra piece this way. I thought with this material or minor piece arrangement, this would be kind of awkward. But looking at it again, white can't really threaten that knight on c4, so they can't force it to move and make me lose this bishop. My king's a little exposed, but even if white checks, I'd probably just move it. Queen d4 check. I might have to dance away a little bit. I control this diagonal, though, so my king can probably take refuge on g7. And still rook b8 is coming. That's the move that inevitably will be played. Okay. Yeah, I didn't have much time at all to think about this one, but rook takes d8 does look smoother. I just saw a line where I wind up the exchange, and after everything that had happened this game, I figured, let's just do this. We both have a minute left. I'm probably better. Let's see if I can win it. So I am up the exchange, but white does have two pawns for it. I thought with the double attack here, I have a good chance of winning something back, though. So bishop b6 was played. I thought bishop g5 might be a better try. And I was speculating maybe f6 take and take here, trying to double attack these points. The engine prefers e5, though, trying to undermine the bishop this way. Interesting. If I can get something going with my f and my e pawns, before white starts utilizing this pawn majority, then I like black's chances to win here. And the engine also seems to think black might push for the win. But the time is the bigger factor, as usual, when it gets down to the end game in these 15-minute games. I probably misplayed it somewhere around here. E5, I was trying to activate my pawn quickly. So here I set a little trap. If knight takes a6, knight c4 check would win the bishop. White did
Check.
this. I gave a check here. Yeah, then they offered a draw, but I wanted to keep playing. So knight f1. They take here. e4. Yeah, your guess is as good as mine as to what the correct result should be from here. Predictably, the computer says it's a complete draw. It's already calculated how this will end in a draw.
Check.
Check. King d7. Knight b5. I push this pawn. Yeah, I think they gave up their bishop a little early. They could have played king d3 here. And I don't know what I would have done. I probably would have done something with my rook, like rook d5 check, or maybe rook here. Yeah, I think I was briefly thinking about rook f2. Take, here, rook takes. This should probably be a draw somehow. I think white's knight plus 2 pawns could compensate for that f-pawn. But they sacrificed that bishop, and that was a little premature, and now they were
Check.
down enough time,
Check.
and I was winning, so
Check.
I got the victory
Check.
at long last.
Check.
So we really had to hang on for dear life in this one out of the opening.
Checkmate.
Always makes me nervous when I'm playing this line. But I think we learned a thing or two about this. I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say about this line. And I know some players are specialists in this variation, like Elvenbred, who's a national master who plays this for black. If you're watching, give me some feedback on my Najdorf play. It does produce very exciting games, though, so hope you guys like this one. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll be back tomorrow with another video. Bye, guys.